Just who we are and what we do. KHEAA, we are Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority. So we produce publications that are about getting into college and how to pay for it. We have 13 outreach counselors across the state, so that's my job. So our whole entire job is just helping answer questions and find money for people. So it's a pretty awesome job. We do have the College Info Roadshow, so if you've ever seen that bus come to your school, you can get on the bus and file your FAFSA or create an FSA ID or a KHEAA account or anything like that. And then, of course, we're just, like I said, hands-on help with filing FAFSA. You'll have an outreach counselor in your school that will have days and appointment times that you can set up and sit down with them and answer any questions and help file the FAFSA together. We also help with verification, which is if your FAFSA form is pulled to be verified, which many are. KHEAA also helps with verification. That's something that happens in the spring. And then we administer financial aid grants and scholarships that are provided by state funds. So the types of financial aid, these are just the terms that you often hear that sometimes you may not know the difference between some of these. Grants, that is need-based money. That's going to come from how much money the FAFSA says that you can afford to pay for college. If it shows that you have need, then that's where grants come into play. There are federal grants and there are state grants available, and we'll get into those in just a minute. Scholarships, those are merit or performance-based, so based on something that sets you apart, basically. So something that you're either good at, something that's different about you, something about where your family works or where you live or things like that. Those are the different types of scholarships. Work study is a federal program where you can work on campus and make some money to help pay tuition, or if your tuition's paid, make a little money to go in your pocket. And then federal loans, we'll touch on federal loans as well. The sources of financial aid, of course, the government, federal and state. So when you file your FAFSA form, the free application for federal student aid, that will determine whether you're eligible for anything that's going to come from the federal government or anything that's coming from the state based on your financial need. So once you have that filled out, it will determine what your need is, and we'll talk a little bit about how it figures that in just a minute. Institutional, that's going to be anything that comes from the college that you are going to, so college or technical school. A lot of schools will have lots of different institutional scholarships. They'll have scholarships that are based on if you come in with a 3.5 GPA and a 24 on your ACT, you're guaranteed $5,000 a year or whatever it may be. They also, that's where your sports scholarships are going to fall under institutional. And then also a lot of colleges have just donors that have set up specific scholarships for specific programs that you may go into, programs of study or things like that, or a scholarship that's for a student that's attending this college that's from Hardin County. So those are the types of scholarships that are from the institution. Then private, those are going to be like your community scholarships. So if you have a Lions Club, Kiwanis Club, if you work for a manufacturing company that's here in town and they give a scholarship to a student whose parent works for them or anything like that, those are going to be the private scholarships. And those are some of the most untapped scholarships out there. I think that everyone just kind of thinks about that as a last resort type thing. Like they're seeing all these other numbers come in and then they think like, oh yeah, well maybe there's, but some of those have earlier deadlines. So sometimes getting in and finding out about those private scholarships earlier. That is going to really benefit you all. And I will say, we have a book that we put out that most of the libraries or guidance offices, they're going to have a copy. They're about that thick. So I don't like travel with a box of them, but it has every county listed in the state of Kentucky, and you find your county, and it lists every private scholarship that is awarded for your county. So to check that out, even if it's like, if your high school has a copy and it's not the 22-23 version, it's probably the same scholarship is still out there, and it'll tell you how to get in contact with somebody. We also have that available on our website, so you can look at a PDF version of it. So it's very helpful. I'm sorry? It's on page 13. And it also, on page 13, has some scholarship search sites that we actually say these are legitimate search websites, because if you just go blindly online to look for scholarships, it is a beast out there. Of course, we try to remind, don't ever, you should never have to pay for a service to help you find scholarships. So there are good ones that are free to help you find scholarships. Military. There are several military benefits. Your recruiting office or your unit education officer should have more specific information about military. We do also have publications that are specific to military families, and you can request those on KHEAA.com, or you can just look at our PDF versions on there as well if they're not in your library or your guidance office or anything like that. So what is the FAFSA? I've already mentioned the FAFSA several times, but that's just assuming that people know what it is, and a lot of people do not. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. And so regardless of whether or not you think that you are going to receive need-based aid, you still need to file the FAFSA. Unfortunately, that is just something that most all institutions require, even for their institutional aid. So if you get a scholarship based off of your GPA and ACT, the financial aid office at that college is still going to want to see a FAFSA. So it is much easier. So I filed it years ago, and it was all on paper, and it was like that thick, and nothing figured numbers for you. So now, of course, it's all online, and there is actually a tool in there, the IRS data retrieval tool. So once you put your social security number and your name, and I think there's a couple of other identifying factors, it will actually pull information from the IRS, so you don't have to input every one of those numbers. You just want to have your tax return documents to double check that those numbers are correct. So a lot of people are like, I don't want to fill this out, I don't want to give out my information. Well, it's the federal government, they already have your information, so this is just like putting it somewhere else. So but it is so helpful because it prevents like mixing up a number or something. It's just an easier way. So we do say that when people do not use the data retrieval tool, they are so much more likely to be flagged for verification from just like tiny little mistakes. So, I mean, and if you are flagged for verification, that is, it sounds scary. It's really not that big of a deal. It's something that we can work through pretty quick. It's just saying like, hey, we're seeing a number that doesn't match, or are you sure this is how many people you support, or, there's just a million reasons that they can do that. So filling out the FAFSA, I'm not going to talk much about it because you guys can check this out, and it's going to tell you most of what you need to know. Student and parent will create an FSA ID, and you will want to keep that because you'll use that every year that you're in college. you will reapply for the FAFSA and you will use that same ID. So FSA ID hints. One thing, students, the biggest thing, and actually parents too, if you have a school or work email address, it's best that you don't use those when setting up your ID, because if a student graduates and that email address is no longer active, or if you change jobs and that email address no longer, connects to you, just if you set up something that's completely separate, like just a Google or something, it will be better off in the end, because then you have to call and try to fix it, and it's a big deal. But it will ask you security questions, so it just says be prepared for those. And most of that is just saying remember it, because you have to remember it every year. The expected family contribution. So when you file the FAFSA, it takes all of your income and assets into consideration, and it comes up with a number that the government thinks this is how much you can afford to spend on your child's education. So there is a crazy formula that's used, and at my last staff meeting, we broke it down and we all had to do it all manually and figure it out and see where it all comes into play. And I will say that people are always really concerned about assets, but assets do not affect your expected family contribution nearly as much as income. So that's just like one of the only things that I can really, tell you. Don't be quite as afraid of assets, because, everybody starts to panic, like, do I need to put this in somebody's name, because we want you to get the most money you can, but assets don't affect it quite as much as income. When they're determining the cost of attendance, that's going to be your direct costs, the billable costs from the school, so your tuition and fees and your room and board being your meal plan and things like that. The indirect costs are the transportation, books and supplies, miscellaneous. Obviously, that is an estimated number. But when they look at cost of attendance for a college, it does figure that in. When they're determining whether or not you have financial need, this is what a financial aid office will do. So once you file the FAFSA and you have an EFC of $1,000, let's say, the financial aid office will get a student aid report, and it will say, Brandy Forker her parents can pay $1,000 for her education. That's her expected family contribution. So they will take the cost of attendance, which figures in those estimated costs, the transportation, the books, all that kind of stuff. They will subtract that expected family contribution from the cost of attendance, and then it will determine how much your financial need is. From that, we start talking about the different types of aid. If you have a need, a specific amount of need, and it's such a variant, but with what school you go to. I mean, if you go to a private school versus a public school versus a community college, your need is all going to be so different, because the cost of attendance at the different schools are also different. But these are just some of the types of aid. So the biggest thing that you will hear is the Pell Grant. You'll hear people talk about so-and-so, are you Pell eligible? Are you Pell? So if you meet a certain financial threshold, then it determines whether or not you are Pell eligible. So for the 22-23 school year, the Pell Grant is almost $7,000. So if your financial aid report, your FAFSA report, says you have need for that, then the federal Pell Grant this year is almost $7,000. Then there is supplemental. If it still doesn't meet somebody's need, there's more. There are teach grants that are very specific. That is if you are going into education. This is something that you would apply to later on. These are automatics. Federal work study. When you receive a financial aid package from the particular college, it will offer work study if it's available to you. Now, that does not mean if it's on your financial aid package that you have to accept it. You don't have to. But if you're eligible for it, it will be listed on there and offer it to you. And then the loans that are through the federal government, and we'll touch on those in just a minute. Now, this is specific to Kentucky. So we award the CAP grant, which is the College Access Program grant. And that is up to $5,300. So if you file your FAFSA and you are determined that you are Pell eligible, you don't apply for this, you will automatically receive that on your financial aid letter. Then if you are going to a private school and you, because private schools are typically more expensive, then the Kentucky tuition grant would be on there as well. So these are not anything that you would have to apply for. If they're eligible, it'll be on your award letter. And then scholarships. We do have dual credit scholarships. We have a lot of students that take dual credit classes, but that's not so much going to be affecting your college stuff. But this Work Ready Kentucky scholarship. Okay, let's see. The Work Ready Kentucky scholarship is one of the best. I mean, it's still fairly new. But if you are interested in a 2-year technical program, almost everything is covered 100%. It is not need-based. So even if if it says that, your family can afford to pay tons, it will still pay up to the cost of tuition at any community college in Kentucky. And it will pay for 60 hours or completion of an associate's degree, whichever is first. And it is anything that is in business and IT, healthcare, transportation, and logistics. There's 2 other headings, but I mean, I'm telling you, when you start looking at the specific programs, there are tons of programs. There are tons of 2-year degrees that are covered by this Work Ready scholarship. Now, you do have to apply for the scholarship, but it's not like 5 of you apply and 1 of you get it. If you meet the eligibility, which is basically you've graduated from high school, I think that there is maybe a GPA requirement, but it's something not high. It's something in like the mid, like the C range. But as long as you apply, I mean, you will receive that money. And so as long as you I think it's a 2.5 GPA. I'll check on that and let y'all know at the end. Or it's 2.5 or 3.0 while you're in the program, then you'll continue to receive the money. And I mean, it will pay for a 2-year program. And so a lot of people may say, I want to be a nurse, but I'm going to get my BS in. But if you know that you're going to start out at the community college, you can apply for this scholarship and say, I am seeking an associate's, and you can get those first 2 years covered and get, your RN, then continue on. Because if you fill out the application and you say, I'm seeking a bachelor's degree, it will kick you out because it'll say this is for 2-year programs. So, I mean, if there's something that you think that you could use, and then if you want to get a bachelor's, move on. But this is a game changer. This is for so many families that are like, whatever the government says I can pay, I really can't. This is a game changer for people. So that is the Work Ready Kentucky Scholarship, and it is May 1st is when that will become available. KHEAA, there is a breakdown of KHCEC awards, and it will tell you based off your GPA how much you're earning, and you should have a KHEAA account. If you have not set one up, just go on to KHEAA.com and set up a KHEAA account, and you'll want to check and make sure that the KHCEC award that is in there is correct. So you just make sure that your GPA for that year was input correctly, so you have the right amount of money in there. And you can use this guide to check that out. If there's any discrepancy, you can just let your guidance office know and they can fix that. KHCEC does have to stay in the state of Kentucky. That's the biggest question that we get about that. And it is renewable. Like, you can get KHCEC money for 4 years. So for every year that you are in school for a bachelor's, and it is active for 5 years. So if you graduate and you say, I got a really good job, I'm working at Lowe's, and I'm on track to be a manager, and I'm not going to go to college right now, and then you decide the next year, yeah, I am going to take classes, that KHCEC money is still there. So it is good for 5 years. So if you waited 3 years at Lowe's and then you decided you were going to take classes, you'd have 2 years left of it. So you have 5 years to use 4 years worth of KHCEC money. So they do give you 1 buffer year. The only exception is if you are active duty military, they put it on pause while you are serving. And when you get out, they unpause it, and then you have, from that point, however much time you had left to begin with. They've also expanded. KHCEC now can be used for registered apprenticeships, and this is such a big deal because we have so many students who, you know, hope you're able to use it for boots, hard hats, whatever it may be. So that is a really good extension. And then federal loans. Of course, those always come into play. There are basically 3 things that you need to know about federal loans. There are subsidized loans and unsubsidized loans. The difference with that, the unsubsidized will make you unhappy. That's the way I always remembered it. Because the unsubsidized, you immediately have to start repaying those loans. The subsidized, you don't repay until after you have graduated, and you are not earning any interest on those loans until after you graduate or stop going. So that's the biggest difference in those. And then the plus loan is a parent loan. So the federal direct loans, those are going to be in a student's name. And then the plus loan, those would be in the parent's name. So on an award letter, if those show up, that doesn't mean that you have taken out these loans. They still have to be accepted, before anything. And so these are the limits on those loans. This is how much you can receive in those federal loans for school. Of course, we try to do everything we can to help find money from different places so we don't have to worry about what the loan limits are. And then this is just showing you a visual of your federal loan repayment with the different levels of debt. So this I'm going to click through pretty quick. It's just going to show you how they stack up the financial aid. So they're going to start with, this is not aid, but they're going to start with that money they expect your family can pay. So they're going to crop that right off the top. Then they're going to, Pell Grant is the first thing they apply after that. Then a CAP grant, that's the Kentucky one. Then if you're at a private school, it's going to be the KTG. And these are awards, they're estimating it with that $2,403 of expected family contribution. They just picked a random amount. And then your KHCEC money, and then it gets into institutional stuff after that. So it's going to be all the federal and state, then institutional, and then your direct loans. So this is just showing what a sample award letter from a college might look like. And then if there is a difference, then you would have to look at options for filling that gap. So that's where private scholarships, employer benefits, tuition payment plans, other loan options would fall into place. In Kentucky, we do have the Advantage Education Loan. So these are fixed interest rates. This is, probably the best student loan product out there. We've had other states that have copied the way that Kentucky has set up their Advantage Education Loan. So it's a good loan if you need to go that route. Of course, we try to find money before that, but if you need loans, the Advantage Education Loan is a great choice. And there's also information about it in the college circuit, and that is all on the KHEAA website as well. So this is just showing you how many colleges are in the state of Kentucky, because we always have the students that, grumble like, oh, I don't want to stay in Kentucky, but there are so many colleges in the state. And the exception with your KEAS money, the only time that you can take that KEAS money out of state is if there is a program that is offered somewhere else that the state of Kentucky does not offer. You can request, and then you can potentially get that request granted if, KHEAA, I assume someone at KHEAA makes that determination if you can take that with you. And then getting the facts. This is pretty neat. This is on the KHEAA.com website. You can put in it's like a calculator, it's an estimator. So you can put in your information the way that you kind of would in the FAFSA, and it will give you an estimate of what you can expect. So it's pretty accurate. It's a good tool to use if you're just kind of like, I have no idea where we are. Like, I just need a ballpark idea of what, because if this is your first student that you're filling this out for, it's hard to know, like, where are those thresholds? What's that going to look like? This is the tool to give you a lot of those answers. And then, of course, this is just talking about our website again. And, there's so much that you can find on there that should help you guys through this process. And then this is just showing how you can create that My KHEAA account. That's where you check your KEAS money. And then this is just a little timeline of when you should be doing things. I might say things slightly different from this. October 1st is when you can file your FAFSA. It used to be like, hurry and file, because some of the state and federal money would run out. It's really not the case anymore. We still want you to go ahead and try to get that done as quickly as possible, but it's not like you have to be sitting on your computer on October 1st to make sure that you're going to get those state funds, because evidently a lot of people played the lottery during the pandemic, and now we have a whole lot of money in the state of Kentucky. So, because that is what funds our state scholarships, is the lottery. But I like to just say October, file the FAFSA, get those college applications in, and make sure you're checking scholarship deadlines. And then, try to have it done before Thanksgiving so you can, take a breather through the holidays. Because then once it's spring semester, things are going to really ramp up, and stuff's going to be coming in from the schools, financial packages and stuff like that. So, if that is a goal you can set, say, let's get this done before Thanksgiving, and then I can just not worry about it for a little while. So I think that's a good timeline. And then these are some of those sites that are listed in here that are just good sites to go to look for scholarships. And then you can text outreach to this 800 number, and then we will send reminders. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter. Many of the counselors have Facebook pages. We do Facebook Lives, just answering questions and things like that as well. And then JP, your counselor, he'll be at your school. There will be dates set up that he is, filling out FAFSAs and answering questions and things like that. So